thanks everyone for joining. I would love to introduce Vignesh here. And Vignesh is a very interesting case study for us, uh, primarily because Vignesh moved into internal audits from a completely unrelated domain. So just to give you a little bit of background, Vignesh was working as an engineering manager, as a project manager for one of the largest equipment manufacturers in the world when he got exposed to the idea of GRC and then gradually migrated towards risk management and internal audit. I think I'd like to start with understanding your story around what led you to that transition, because it's a little unusual, it's a little unorthodox. So would love to understand, Vignesh, what led you to tread this path?
Thank you, Ayush. Uh, so when I came to the US to do my master's in management information systems, that is when I got to know about the big four, risk management, like consulting. So I was always enticed to like start my career with like Ernst & Young or like Deloitte, working in like New York City area. But then when I got this opportunity to work for a company who was like planning to take all of the IT in-house, where they traditionally outsourced all of their IT activities. I joined this company where I used to be like a technical product manager, technical program manager, being the liaison between the business and the engineers. I also owned a suite of applications where I was responsible for taking care of all of the hygiene and also keeping them compliant. So that is when my actual practical experience with the GRC space started. So I was answering all of these questionnaires that the testing team would like send to me, and it was pretty interesting. And then I got to know that all of these results would like get the visibility of the business unit leaders. So the kind of work that the GRC team was doing was like at a company level, whereas I was working as a application owner for like 4-5 applications within like a small team of like 10 to 15 people. I was like, oh, this is pretty exciting. I want to like go work on stuff that is affecting the entire organization and also get that visibility where I go present these results to like the business unit leaders and like the C-suite executives. So that is where my interest towards moving into GRC began, and then that is how I got into GRC.
So Vignesh, that's actually super interesting. Now, oftentimes when GRC teams create remediation steps for compliance or otherwise, the remediation steps are assigned to various people across different teams. And from what it looks like, you were one of the beneficiaries of that so-called bane, right? And somehow you fell in love with that and you want to do that even more. You want to do that deeper, right? So would love to understand what is it that you were thinking? What led you to fall in love with that and go deeper?
Yeah, that's a great point, Ayush. Being an application owner, so one of the benefits or like the pain point is like having to go through to like implement these remediation steps to bring your application back to compliance, right? Most of these times, the remediation steps are like only making the application better, only making your life easier in the long term. So it is actually, like you said, it's a benefit. The thing that I started loving about GRC having to do this is when it can affect my applications, the 4 or 5 ones that I own, in a very positive way, how much of an impact would this GRC role have on the organization as a whole? Right? There were like hundreds of applications within scope for like compliance, and they were spread across 3 business units. And the GRC would help all of these applications to become compliant in a way, become better. So I thought that impact that this role could make on the organization and the kind of learning that I would get by understanding like a suite of 100 applications, and also the relationship that I could get to build with the business leaders of various organizations within the company. I thought that was like pretty cool and sexy, and I was like hooked onto it.
I'm glad you used the word sexy here, and oftentimes that's not how people would describe GRC and risk management. And that's great, and that actually brings me to this point, Vignesh. If I break it down a little further, right, there are components to it. There is a problem solving / discovery component to it, where you actually go deep into systems to identify what's wrong, what's not working, what's not what it should be. And there is a component to it which is very heavily people oriented, where you have to get people to buy into what you're saying, going through the change management process across the organization, And then there is a component of making sure that you communicate to the stakeholders the right way. Which component of it is the one that you found the most amount of joy in doing? Of course, you have to be good at all of it, and you're one of the fastest growing professionals in the space. But which part of it gave the most amount of joy?
I think I would like pick two together because I love two of the three that you described. One is the opportunities to learn, right? So there are numerous opportunities to learn about the applications that is bringing the business to the company. So you have to be aware of like what are these applications, what do they do, how do they fit into the bigger picture of like bringing revenue to the company, and are they like hosted on cloud, are they like hosted on-prem, and like what are the risks that are like associated with each of these differences. So plenty of learning, and you can only learn by interacting with like people, right? If you have to like sit by yourself, read through like n number of documentation that describes the data flow processes, that describes the architecture of the application, you would not learn as deeper or like as efficient than meeting with the application owners as in like, hey, can we grab a cup of coffee and can you like explain me how your system works? And both go hand in hand, right? And also you learn all of this stuff, and then what you give in return is like, oh, you did not do this, and this is the flaw in your system. So you also have to have that communication skill, so in a way that you tone as if you're trying to help your engineering teams, and not like sound like a person who's always finding fault, even though that is what we do. So I think all of the three are very much important, but I think learning, the hunger to learn about the different components within your company, different applications that support the overall business, was my go-to to GRs.
And if I have to take this question one step further, when you started out in the journey, there would obviously have been a certain degree of romanticization about the idea of auditing, going deep, trying to find out where the systems can become better. Were there some parts of it which felt a lot more difficult than you had originally anticipated? And if you could just share some anecdote, what were those experiences like?
So difficulties, I would say, from a project management perspective, you have to deliver like within a certain period of time, right? This could be an application that you're already aware of, processes that you're already aware of, where you could have like more time to become comfortable in focusing on the risks and controls. But there are times where you have no clue about the process, you have no clue about the system, and sometimes it is like a system that is not implemented into production, right? You have to go there and understand the system, assess the system, and also give recommendations or like identify gaps within the same time period. I think that is like one of the biggest challenges, where regardless of the system, regardless of the complexity, compliance does not look into it. It's like always time based. It's like, have you done this within this quarter? Have you done within this 4-week period? And you have to keep delivering. I think that's the biggest challenge. And the other challenge, I would say, it's just like the way it is like repetitive, right? So initially, a new system, you learn all of this stuff, and then you're very excited. But then over a period of time, it becomes repetitive. You have to keep doing the same stuff over and over. And I think that is also a challenge in a way.
And for the second point, what have you done to, at a personal level, what have you done to sort of mitigate that? What have you done to kept this interesting for yourself all these years?
As you grow in your career, I think there are like staffs that come and report to you, and then you have to train them. So for the repetitive work, I believe I take that opportunity for my people management skills. So I train them in a way that I train them in the areas that I'm like more comfortable with handing off or like delegating. So I use that opportunity to like bring in people, but also for the ones that are repetitive, there are always assumptions made, right? I've seen like external auditors coming in and saying, hey, this is something that we did last year and the year before. So we are very much comfortable with how the system works. Are you able to like provide me like screenshots of your logs or like your configurations, very similar to like what we gave last time. They gave the application owner like examples, and then they assume a lot of stuff that things are not changed, right? I think in order to like solve for this, though it is repetitive, it is very important for professionals within GRC to like go ask the basics again. Things might have changed, and there are like change in like application ownerships, and so when you go there, you like ask them if nothing changed in your system. Do you have like any new integrations? Are you collecting like any new data points? Or so I think going back to the basics, even if it is like repetitive, is pretty key.
Got it. And so you mentioned an interesting point around external audits, right? So now you've spent most of your career being an internal auditor, right? Which probably also means 4x the number of audits. But then that also means that you have a different dynamic with the auditees, the teams that you're auditing, right? So in your experience in all these years, when you have an external auditor versus when you have an internal auditor, how do you see the dynamics being different, and how do you deal with that?
The engineering teams are like more comfortable with the internal auditors than the external auditors. External auditors come in for a certain purpose, right? It is, hey, I'm coming here for your PCI, I'm coming here for your SOC, I'm coming here for ISO, IBA, like whatnot. So they have like a fixed agenda, and they have like fixed scope, and then they are only looking at things they are wanting to look at. They are not going to take a step back, look into the bigger picture, have that sense of ownership, right? Being an internal auditor, you are part of the company. You are only wanting to like make the company better, and you're also wanting to like give your independent view about how controls are. So you not only limit yourself within like a compliance framework or like a set of limited controls or within a scope, you are risk assessing first. So we perform like enterprise risk management, where we try to like understand the key risks for the company for the upcoming year, and then that is how we scope in our, like that is how we do audit planning, right? So we scope in certain systems or like processes, and then when we go about it, we think from a risk perspective. We wear that risk-based hat. We do risk assessments, and then we come up with like set of controls that we anticipate the systems to have, and then go about testing it. So I think the sense of ownership is where I see the key difference between being an internal auditor and an external auditor. And also external auditors, for the most part, they are like compliance-based. Internal auditors, they are risk-based.
So that also, by the way, could mean that you ask a lot of questions that are completely out of syllabus, because they may not correspond to a NIST control directly or a SOC 2 control directly, right? So you ask questions that are out of syllabus. You ask questions, the responses to which may potentially look people not so great. So do people run away when they see you? Do people hide in the dark when they see you? Or what's been the typical response to you coming in for an internal audit typically?
With my experience, I've seen like in the spectrum of 1 to 10, like all kind of people, right?
So let me ask this question this way, right? So when you're going in as an internal auditor, right? Initially people will, so obviously there is going to be a stage when people will run away from you, where they hide themselves, because in the early stages of the conversation, they might not even know what's not right? Because they, according to them, they would have fixed a lot of things, and they would have kept a very hygienic environment. But then as the conversations mature, they'll realize there are a bunch of things that they should have taken care of, but they haven't. And in those cases, you're like this guy who comes in, that examiner who comes in, asks a lot of questions which are out of syllabus, potentially the devil with the horns, with a spear, right? So, in those situations, what are the various levels of change management? Do you first build a chemistry with the respective teams, share a few drinks, make yourself look like an insider that's there to help them, and then eventually build up to the tougher parts of the conversation? How does it typically work? What does the anatomy of the change management process look like?
So yeah, very well put, Ayush. When we start, so we are taking care of the relationships with these stakeholders, right? But the first point of contact is always your first audit. So though we say that we build the relationship with the stakeholders, it is not until we audit them for the first time. So we ask them the very first question: have you been part of like any internal audit process in the past? And when they say like no, we bring them up to speed about like what the process would look like, and what are the expectations. As in, we would ask for an evidence, and then you have like 48 hours turnaround time for you to like get back to us. If not, then there would be like escalation. But we are like open to receiving feedback. If you're not able to meet that 48-hour deadline, then let us know much in advance and like why you're not able to meet. So we are flexible there, right? But then the first part of the audit is when it's like discovery and understanding the systems and the processes. So it's a lot of learning from our end, but it also lets them to like open up. I've seen like teams where they identify their own gaps when they are revisiting their processes, because how many times an engineering team would like go describe their processes and systems to a basic level. um, they might have that blind spots, right? So sometimes they are becoming aware of these blind spots and they are like, oh, then there's this management identified finding where it's like, oh, these are the gaps that we have identified in the past and we are like working towards it. And then they are like identifying the gaps as we describe through, as we go through the audit, and they are like immediately fixing it, right? There are companies where, oh, I found this, and then the next day morning you open the laptop and there's an email that says, we identified this user who did not have to like have a privileged access. We removed them last evening. So, and then when they keep doing this towards like the end is where we typically see the friction. It's like you go into the closing meeting, you bring in the directors, senior directors, or like the C-suite, and then you're sitting in the same room, and then the team that worked with you like day in and day out are put in front, and you're going through these audit gaps. That is when they jump in and say, no, I don't think that is a risk with this particular gap. They always challenge the risk, as in like they always go back to, but has it ever happened, right? You know that there is like this user who do not need access, or this change that went out without proper approvals, but I can show you like evidence that nothing bad happened with that. And the anecdote that I give is, there is this ship and there is a hole. What we are saying is there is a hole in your ship. Doesn't mean that the ship is already sunk, but the water is like coming in, right? So there's a probability or like a possibility that the things can go wrong. That is the risk. So that is where the education comes into place. It's like, hey, this is something, the risk is like not what went wrong. It's like what can go wrong. So a lot of friction happens only during the reporting phase and the closing it.
So most people that I've come across in the industry, by the way, are people who are very well-meaning. People don't inherently want to maintain a risky environment, so to say. Even if it's not out of conscience or goodness of heart, it's about, I mean, they don't want to be at the wrong end of the situation should something bad happen, right? The ship is sinking, they don't want to be seen with it, right? So, and this is a question perhaps for people who are just breaking into the GRC field, people who are just starting up on their audit journeys, right? And and more so for internal auditors, because external auditors, the agency is very well established through an external legitimization. But when you're trying to create change management within an organization, it's important for people to open up to you. It's important for your auditees to not feel like you're throwing them under the bus. It's important for them to feel like you're perhaps making them succeed in some ways. So what would your recommendation be in terms of how an internal auditor just starting up in the journey approach that relationship so that he or she gets perceived somewhat like an insider, somebody that's there to help and not somebody that'll throw them under the bus?
I think it comes to like people management. We are all humans. So it's the same message, right? So it is black or white. So you either have this control pass or like fail. That's the truth. That's the fact, because we go by fact as auditors, right? We put together the data, we show them this is the factual evidence and factual statement that we have. And then the report tone is going to be a way that it shows that you are putting somebody under the bus. But like how you deliver the message to them and how you maintain that relationship through the 8-week engagement or like the 6-week engagement that you have with the team is where the difference is. And I think everything else is factual statement except for the relationship, which cannot be quantified. I think that is where, I mean, when they start, it could be somewhat challenging, but then as they get experience in delivering more and more audits, I think it would become more easier on like how to deliver this message.
And can you recall a situation where you had to deal with a very tough stakeholder and just, you know the truth, as you mentioned, right? The findings are black and white. There's no gray area in between. You're either compliant or non-compliant. It's completely binary. So can you recall a situation where you had a very tough stakeholder to convince, and then you had to pull certain strings and do a lot of orchestration to get them on board in terms of carrying on the necessary remediation? What was it like?
Some of the challenges that I've seen is the lack of ownership. Everybody agrees to the fact, right? If you say that these are the number of servers that are like vulnerable, that did not have their latest patch applied, nobody's gonna refute it. I mean, it's a data that you cannot negate. But what happens is who is taking the accountability? Say, for example, an engineering team has like a fleet of servers that there are like bunch of vulnerabilities on it. So they are depending on a security team for them to like provide with the tools and like the data so that they can act upon, right? But also the challenge from an engineering perspective is they are like always driven for speed. They are driven from a product mindset. They do not want like any disturbance to their production server for hygiene and security purposes. That is like not their priority. But for the security team, that is their priority. So it's always like the lack of accountability is a challenge that I see. But at the end of the day, when a server is like vulnerable, what goes down is like the company, right? The company's reputation risk, and then the company's security risk, and all of the fines associated with it are a huge challenge for the company, right? Nobody takes, I wouldn't say nobody, like back in the days, it was a challenge for the engineering partners and like the security team, GRC team to see, to put the company first. So they were like very protective of their systems. They were very protective of their team. They were very protective. They were like very territorial, right? But then your need is to like make them put the company first, see this as one company and not like different teams. So we had to like bring in, like at one time I had to like bring in the chief financial officer of a company to one of the closing meetings to like set the bar as an, I don't really care about whose problem this is, right? Whether it's like an engineering problem, whether it's a security problem, what I want you to do is go fix this. I do not want to like see any vulnerabilities that is putting our company at a huge security risk, right? So I think that is the extreme case example that I'm giving you, but that is how that's like the one common issue that I see across companies is the ownership and accountability of the issues that we are identifying.
And maybe from switching gears a bit, from a skill acquisition point of view, now on the face of it, GRC has a significant bit of local context to it. So there's CCPA in California, there's FedRAMP, and in India there's a bunch of regulations that the central bank has imposed on financial services companies, for example. Then Singapore has its own version of the Privacy Act, which is the PDPA. So do you see, and countries across the globe are becoming a lot more conscious about information security and privacy. Central banks across the globe are becoming a lot more conscious about it. Governments across the globe are becoming a lot more conscious about it. So do you see, in some ways, the idea of GRC diverging across the globe? Do you think that the skills that somebody would acquire as an auditor or a risk manager are going to have a strong local context? Or is it something which is the other way around, where because a lot of countries are getting sensitized by it, no matter what they choose to call it, the skills you acquire in one particular geography become very fungible across geography. So where do you see this being headed?
When I came to the US like 10 years back, I got to know about this risk management, compliance, and all this stuff, right? Back then it was like, this is like, when it comes to like privacy, the EU is like very strict about it. And when you think about like security and like compliance, GRC, I thought like most of those opportunities were within the US. So there was one point in time where I would ask my colleagues back from India, as like working in the US, hey, will I be even getting a job if I go back to like India? Because I've never heard about GRC or like compliance or like security back in India. It was all about like becoming a software engineer or like taking care of and like production support or like maintenance projects for US clients. That is my understanding of like India IT back then. But now, like you said, the GRC space has like expanded with all of these regulations that have already come up or gonna come up. So I think there's like lack of skills within this particular space. So now I'm comfortable to say with the skills and experience that I've gained, I can go and be readily productive like in any part of the globe, because this has only become global.
Because at some point, controls keep overlapping no matter how different companies different frameworks choose to articulate them. Right? Access control is access control. For example, information security training to employees is something that everybody would recommend that you do. Asset management is asset management across frameworks. So is that what sort of brings the fungibility there or the transferability?
Exactly. It's at the core, it is going back to like understanding the basics of IT, right? You need to like understand system architecture. You need to understand what are the basic IT general controls. You need to like understand how efficient they should be in order to like protect your environment. And then regardless of like protect the systems and the data, right? When you are comfortable with this, whether it is like CCPA or like GDPR or like any other regulations for that matter from like India, it's easily transferable. The core competence is the same, but the lens in which like you see would be different. I think it is easily transferable across the globe.
I have a question for you on behalf of fellow security founders, if I may. And I'm sure, given the way the space has evolved with the acronym soup that's there, you would be inundated with a lot of emails around different solutions and different solution archetypes and different acronyms, right? So how do you cut through the noise? What is it that one has to do to get your attention, to make you feel like it's something really worth your time? What are the 3-4 most important problem areas where you essentially try to solve?
So the bottom line should be is how many hours am I gonna like save implementing your solution, right? And then
so that's the key metric that you essentially look to solve for, productivity.
From the industry standpoint, right? So we are looking for a particular tool. I'll give you an example, and then we'll have to like convince our CFO at the end of the day that in order to get a particular approval to procure a particular tool, what is the return on investment? What is the cost benefit there, right? I have to like tell a story that implementing this particular tool is gonna reduce these many man hours, which I can use for like some other purpose, and then I'll also be able to deliver on like multiple regulations, or I could use this across like the internal audit team. I could use this for like security compliance. So that could be like multiple teams that could benefit out of implementing a particular tool. So when you are
so for you the business space is predominantly anchored around the number of person hours that you can optimize and the kind of productivity that you can bring to the team. Am I getting that right? Okay.
Yes, return of investment. Yep, that is like the huge challenge when it comes to getting approval for implementing a GRC tool. I've had this experience with like multiple companies. I would definitely say it is a challenge even for us. Like as a GRC professional, I want to like have all of these suite of tools that could like make my life easier, right? But at the end of the day, when management is making a decision to approve a certain budget, it has to be like cost effective, as in $60,000 versus like $1 million. It's like a game changer, right? You can have all of the bells and whistles, but if it is going to be $1 million, good luck with that. But if it's going to be my product, we are going to like deliver this module to you. It's like $60,000 per year. I'm just putting out a number there. And it's going to like help you take care of your PCI stuff, your SOC stuff, and also like help you integrate like frameworks. But we can expand that in the future as required. So to get the approval for $60,000 would be like easier for me than to like convince somebody to like approve $1 million budget. So first thing first, it's your return on investment, so that your cost should be low, and then it has to be solving like key problems. So understanding the key problems from the industry is an important aspect for the founders. And then once you understand that, pitch in a story as in this is how much we'll be able to like provide you as a return on investment. And that'll be a buy. Yeah.
Got it. Great. Thanks, Vignesh, for helping us put this together. The second episode of Risk Grustlers. Thanks for trying to make GRC sexy again. We obsessed with GRC, and we'd like more people to obsess with GRC. Thanks for simplifying it, demystifying it for people out here. And thanks for spending a Friday with us. I think we owe you a drink. So I think let's head out for a drink.
All right. Thank you so much, Ayush.
Thanks everyone for listening to this. All right. Thank you.